The American outpost on top of Nui Ba Din Mountain was getting overrun at night, and we were called to get troops up there as soon as possible. The mountain was surrounded by flat land, and enemy troops were in control of the land around the mountain and the slopes of the mountain. The top was full of radio equipment of some sort and was defended lightly by American troops. There were many of us that thought the outpost was a dangerous place to be, and probably could not defend itself well if attacked. We could see that mountain almost every day, as our combat operations were mostly in that area. Well, the time had come for an attack at night as usual, and there was usually a cloud hanging on top of the mountain outpost. The summit was about 3,000 feet up, and that is where the outpost was located. We could not go there right away and had to wait for daylight. We went up there in 3 helicopters at a time lifts, as the top was a small area. Things had been blown up and burnt, and most of the survivors hid from the enemy. About 30 of our troops were killed in the attack. Nui Ba Din was very close to the end of the Ho Chi Minh Trail in Cambodia, and the enemy was in force in the caves of the mountain and in the surrounding area. Apparently, the army wanted that base kept up for radio communication purposes. I don't know if it was worth it. It certainly wasn't for the families of the dead. All the killing that I'd seen was getting to me, but it would get to anyone, I figured, and I kept flying combat. An infantry outfit was getting hit very badly, and the whole flight, with 6 infantry on each helicopter, was on its way to the battle area before the sun rose. We were to drop these fellows off as reinforcements and then get 60 more infantry fellows. We approached at treetop level from downwind, as the helicopters could come in faster and stop fast that way. I could see a cloud of smoke in front of us and could smell gunpowder and blood in the air. When a lot of blood is shed, it smells a lot like iron, but it has an unmistakable smell. This was going to be a real bad LZ, I thought. We were to land in a field where our guys were pinned down. I told the infantry on our helicopter it will be a hot LZ and we were going to land on top of our guys, so be careful and to keep their heads down until we fly up. The crew chief always gives the infantry fellows the word on what they are flying into. I could tell from the serious faces that the infantry veterans could smell the blood also. I always wished more helicopters than 10 could fly in as reinforcements at once. It would be much better to get as many troops on the ground at once so as to come into battle as strong as possible. But there was so much ongoing combat action in our area and so few helicopters that it was a danger for all of us involved, especially the infantry who were usually outnumbered when contact with the enemy was made. Bad tactics. Out of my 9 months of flying combat, only twice did we land 20 or 30 helicopters with infantry at once. They called that a battalion operation. Only twice did senior officers do anything right as far as I was concerned, and air assaults were concerned, in my 9 months of constant LZs and PZs. All the veteran infantry fellows and combat flight crews knew we were taking heavy casualties because of bad tactics. But the bad tactics just went on and on.
We came in low at about 100 miles per hour and started to take small arms fire about a half mile from the LZ. The helicopter crew chiefs and gunners returned fire. This was the first time I saw the enemy use tracers in the daytime. They usually never do this as it gives their position away. I just fired my machine gun at the source of one green tracer line after another. Once one stopped firing, I moved on to the next one. During the whole assault, I must have stopped at least 20 different sources of the green tracers one after another. I either hit the shooters or they stopped firing once my bullets were zipping around their ears. I never saw an enemy soldier the whole time. They always fired from good camouflage cover. Actually, I never saw an enemy soldier the whole 3 months that I was in Vietnam so far. These people were not stupid and they were supreme artists at camouflage. I never saw an enemy standing or crouching in the open and shooting at me except for the 300 or so NVA marching down Route 13. I saw many trees, bushes, and tall grass shooting. That is why it puzzled me that they were using tracers in the daylight. That was the one and only time that I saw them do that. Maybe overconfident, I don't know, but it is easier to hit your target with tracers from an automatic weapon, probably overconfident and trying to hit the helicopters with accuracy. The enemy knew we would fly into anything to save an infantry outfit being overrun, and they probably just prepared for it. But we were flying into the LZ with 10 accurate machine guns firing on each side, plus rockets from both helicopter gunships. The NVA-VC positions were on a rising slope and the pinned-down infantry were in a field below, a very bad position to be in. The infantry knew to have 3 fellows jump out on each side of the helicopter when the skids hit the ground. In any combat situation, the skids hit the ground hard, no mistake on that part. The infantry fellows were usually out of the helicopter in about 3 seconds flat. They knew helicopters drew most all of the enemy fire in LZ and PZ situations. They were big, beautiful targets full of their enemies, and the infantry guys did in no way like to be in helicopters during hot LZs, which at this time in our area was most of the time. We hit the ground fast and tried to pull up fast. The helicopter in front of me had my buddy Denny Fuller as crew chief in it. As it tried to pull up, there was an infantryman hanging by the straps on his pack on Denny's gun post. Afraid the guy would be killed as the helicopter lifted to height, the pilot lowered the helicopter and Denny cut the guy free. The enemy, seeing the helicopter hesitating, figured they had a wounded duck and more enemy fire concentrated on his helicopter. My helicopter kept sort of low to cover that helicopter, and I shot some more areas up until the green tracers stopped shooting at his helicopter and my helicopter. But there were plenty more shooting at us. Then I saw about 3 RPG rounds with smoke trails flying toward the helicopters. The helicopter behind me had an RPG that went through the empty cabin and out the other side and kept on going. A direct empty hit. That was the first and only time I saw an RPG do that. They were very, very lucky. Some of the helicopters had wounded thrown aboard. Mine did not. We all took a few rounds or more, and were in the air heading to pick up more troops, and the ones with the wounded were headed for the closest field evacuation hospital, which I think was at Tay Ninh Base Camp. At this point, the flight was broken up, doing their individual duties as the troopers on the ground were having a very difficult time. We all had enough fuel to pick up more infantry and get back to the battle. We did this as quick as possible, which took us about 90 minutes. 1 minute or 1 second in a battle is a long time. We headed back to the battle once again, taking fire and returning fire in response. More wounded were thrown onto some of the helicopters. I had to change barrels on my machine gun as it was getting too hot and was beginning to warp. One could feel and hear a slight slow down of the rate of fire when the machine gun barrel starts to warp. At least I could. I carried 5 extra machine gun barrels on the cabin wall next to me. We wore thin leather gloves so we could change the barrels without burning our hands. The M60 had a quick release lever that connected the barrel to the rest of the weapon. We went back and forth from picking up more troops and dropping them off at the battle, each time getting shot at. Pretty soon there was very few helicopters that were still able to fly. We did this all day. One last load out of the LZ included a couple of walking wounded. They were not wounded badly, hand and arm wounds, and they wanted only some water to drink and cigarettes to smoke. It was the usual request of the wounded if they were fairly conscious. We flew directly to the 12th Field Evacuation Hospital area in Cu Chi, our base camp. As we approached the landing area of the 12th Field Evac, a lot of dead infantry fellows were laying on the ground on their backs with ponchos covering them. Our rotor blade wind blew some of the ponchos off the poor fellows. We had orders to shut the helicopter down and wait for further orders. There were about 30 dead fellows, and I'm sure a lot more would join them before this battle and other battles in the immediate area were over. The dead infantry fellows looked like high school kids with dirty green fatigues and boots on with blood and burns covering their bodies. Most all of them were 18, 19, and 20-year-old, and most of them were drafted into the army and sent to Vietnam. That is what a hero looks like, a dead kid burnt and bloody. These were the fellows that were fighting the war, the heroes. I was just standing outside of the helicopter when I was struck with a feeling of overtiredness and exhaustion. I had received very little sleep over the past week as usual. I was just looking at these dead kids and suddenly I burst out into tears and was crying hard. These kids are dead. I know they are, but their parents and their families have no idea that they are dead. The families are still preparing to send packages and letters to them, figuring that they are alive. The idea that I should know that they are dead and that their families did not just totally engulfed me with grief and sorrow. I just stood there and cried and cried and cried. I really had an extreme emotional breakdown. All the shooting, all the explosions, all this war stuff, and what do you get? A bunch of dead kids on both sides whose parents and loved ones will never ever get over their huge loss. A suffering pain of sorrow for the rest of their lives. A dark shadow of loss hanging over them in this life. It was just so heartbreaking that I knew that a family's loved one was dead, and the family was probably just going through their innocent daily lives, smiling and talking normally. It was a feeling that overpowered me. I was at the altar of their dead loved one. The bodies were broken laying here, but where did these guys go? They are not here anymore. After about 20 minutes, we had orders to refuel and pick up more reinforcements to bring out to the battle. None of my crew bothered me, and they also had tears in their eyes. No one spoke. I checked the bullet hole damage. Nothing essential was hit. I refueled the helicopter and we picked up more infantry fellows and headed to the battle. I was crying the whole time, but functioning. The battle had quieted down some, thankfully. No soldier that I ever knew of wanted to go into a battle. No rah-rah, let's get them. That's only in the movies, or in someone's mind who never experienced what goes on in battle. I still was crying that whole day and night. I fell asleep crying and woke up just before takeoff the next morning to do everything all over again. My combat experience was taking an emotional toll on me, something that I never expected.